I think this president should appoint a special prosecutor, President Trump, as soon as he gets in, to investigate these abuses of his civil rights and the civil rights of other Americans under color of law. The left has used January 6th to try to jail Trump, and obviously it's been part of this lawfare by the left and the Democratic Party. And we had the lawfare continue to harass not only Trump, but the office of the president, our constitutional republic, and frankly, our national security with the sentencing of President Trump today in New York by the Democrat operative Judge Merchan, who presided over a Soviet-style proceeding at the behest of Democrat politician Alvin Bragg, where Trump was charged with non-crimes and convicted for non-crimes, and now he is officially a felon based on this god-awful process. And the Supreme Court had an opportunity earlier this week to intervene to stop this abusive sentencing of Trump, which took place just 10 days before his inauguration. And you may recall the Supreme Court, to the outrage of the left-wing establishment, with an overwhelming majority, found that Trump had immunity for actions related to his presidency. Things he did as president, he can't be prosecuted for. And if you want to explore that issue as a prosecutor, you have many hurdles and processes you need to jump through, the least of which is not impeding the presidency of the United States and not harassing a president and forcing him to go through the very process he was forced to go through up in New York. And rather than enforce the decision, two of the justices on the Supreme Court, Justice Roberts, the Chief Justice, and Justice Amy Coney Barrett, joined the lefties on the court to allow the sentencing to go forward. And to me, it was really a wild abuse of power by Merchan that should not have been tolerated by the Supreme Court, because it frankly showed contempt for their immunity ruling. If the immunity ruling meant anything, it should have given a pause, if not a complete end, to the proceedings up in New York. But I do think that political pressure and the criticism of the last decision, I think, scared off the chief and Justice Amy Coney Barrett from intervening to stop this from happening. I don't understand the decision. It was only a paragraph long. This is what they wrote. The application for stay presented to Justice Sotomayor and by her referred to the court is denied. So they asked Justice Sotomayor, who has jurisdiction in New York for the Supreme Court on these emergency type cases, is denied for, inter alia, the following reasons. First, the alleged evidentiary violations at President-elect Trump's state court trial can be addressed in the ordinary course of appeal. So the evidentiary violations were using evidence that was obtained from his time as president and basically got into his presidency in a way that was prohibited by the Supreme Court. But he was supposed to be protected from having to go through that process under their decision. I don't understand this. They got a free pass to use it, and no one's going to put a stop to the process that they said needed to take into account these issues before anything was allowed to proceed against any former president? Not to mention the fact he is minutes away, practically speaking, from being inaugurated. And it gets worse. Second, the burden that sentencing will impose on the president-elect's responsibilities is relatively insubstantial in light of the trial court's stated intent to impose a sentence of unconditional discharge after a brief virtual hearing. Oh, so you get to violate the president's rights and Trump's civil rights and his rights as a constitutional officer of the United States as president if you do it virtually? You can smear him. You can abuse the process. ruling makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to me, not because I disagree with the constitutional analysis, it's because I read what Chief Justice Roberts wrote previously on these immunity issues. Makes no sense. Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, Justice Gorsuch, and Justice Kavanaugh would have granted the application. So at least 4 of the justices would have done, in my view, the right thing. And, you know, I know many are saying that, well, now Trump can appeal this, it's over. No, 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 no. This is just the beginning, in my view. Not only for Trump in terms of other challenges and criminal investigations by state prosecutors or others, not only during his time as president now, but after, but future presidents as well. And so the hearing took place this morning. Now remember, Trump until now, at least, has been under a gag order. It's just outrage on top of outrage in terms of the abuses targeting him. And so the sentence, as we've noted in the hearing or in discussion of the Supreme Court case, Merchant said it was going to be an unconditional, an unconditional discharge or discharged unconditionally, which means no punishment, nothing, no fine, no probation, no nothing. So Trump was able to speak truth to power today in going after the court process and the abuses he suffered. Let's listen in to what he had to say.
This has been a very terrible experience. I think it's been a tremendous setback for New York and the New York court system. This is a case that Alvin Bragg did not want to bring. He thought it was, from what I read and from what I hear, inappropriately handled before he got there. A gentleman from a law firm came in and acted as a district attorney, and that gentleman, from what I heard, was a criminal or almost criminal in what he did. It was very inappropriate. It was somebody involved with my political opponent. Part of the records that we're talking about, they're saying, I just noticed where he said I was falsifying business records. Well, the falsification of business records, as they say, it was calling a legal expense in the books where everybody could see them, a legal expense. In other words, that legal fees or legal expense were put down as legal expense by accountants. They weren't put down by me, they were put down by accountants. I didn't call them construction, concrete work. I didn't call them electrical work. I didn't call them anything. They called a legal fee or a legal expense, and for this, I got indicted. It's incredible, actually. Now, if you look, my attorney alluded to it, the top legal scholars and legal pundits in this country, the ones that are quoted all the time on television, that are making their views felt and highly respected people, have said, everyone, virtually everyone that I know of, I haven't seen any to the contrary, not one, and none of these people are not exactly friends of mine, to put it mildly, but they all said this is a case that should have never been brought. It's an injustice of justice. Very respected Jonathan Turley, Andy McCarthy, Judge David Rifkin, a wonderful man who just passed away, by the way, Greg Jarrett, Ellie Honig from CNN, of all places. CNN said that. Paul Ingratian, Alan Dershowitz, they all said this is not a case that should be brought. It's not, think about it, legal expenses are down as legal expenses, and I get indicted for business records. Everybody should be so accurate. It's been a political witch hunt. It was done to damage my reputation so that I'd lose the election, and obviously that didn't work. And the people of our country got to see this firsthand because they watched the case in your courtroom. They got to see this firsthand, and then they voted, and I won and got the largest number of votes by far of any Republican candidate in history, and won, as you know, all 7 swing states, won conclusively all 7 swing states, and won the popular vote by millions and millions of votes. And they've been watching your trial, so they understood it. I wasn't allowed to use the lawyer-client privilege or the reliance on counsel. I had a lawyer that made this deal, and he admitted that. And he was also a totally discredited person. We weren't allowed to use the information from the Southern District that totally discredited him. It wasn't allowed to be put in. And that was terrible, unbelievable. And this is a man who's got no standing. He's been disbarred on other matters, unrelated. And he was allowed to talk as though he were George Washington. But he's not George Washington. He shouldn't have been allowed. The Southern District did a book of approximately 28 pages where I've never seen anything like it. They excoriated him. You wouldn't let it be put into evidence. So he was able to testify as a witness, and I think it's a disgrace to the system. I was under a gag order. I'm the first president in history that was under a gag order where I couldn't talk about aspects of the case that are very important. I guess I'm still under, so probably I won't do it now. I assume I'm still under a gag order. But the fact is that I'm totally innocent. I did nothing wrong. They talked about business records, and the business records were extremely accurately counted. I had nothing to do with them. That was done by an accountant or a bookkeeper who I think gave very credible testimony and was corroborated by everybody that was asked. And with all that's happening in our country today, with a city that's burning to the ground, one of our largest, most important cities burning to the ground, with wars that are uncontrollably going on, with all of the problems of inflation and attacks on countries and all of the horrible things that are going on, I got indicted over calling a legal expense a legal expense. It was called a legal expense. I just want to say I think it's an embarrassment to New York, and New York has a lot of problems, but this is a great embarrassment. I believe that this and other cases that were brought, as you know, the DOJ is very much involved in this case. That's because that's the political opponent they're talking about. The DOJ is very involved. You have a gentleman sitting right there from the DOJ who was from the DOJ's office. He was also involved with the New York State Attorney General's case. And he went from there to here. He went around and did what he had to do. He got them to move on me. But in the meantime, I won the election in a massive landslide. And the people of this country understand what's gone on. This has been a weaponization of government. They call it lawfare. Never happened to any extent like this, but never happened in our country before. And I'd just like to explain that I was treated very, very unfairly. And I thank you very much.
So I played that complete statement by President Trump to educate you because it was an excellent recitation of the issues and abusive process he faced, and because I know the rest of the media wouldn't let you see it. So I'm providing an educational service with Judicial Watch to you, the American people, so you understand about how much our judicial system has failed President Trump and our republic. Next up, I do want to, for the record, detail the abuse by Judge Merchan, and this is Merchan's actual sentence, non-sentence of President Trump.
Mr. Trump, you appear before this court today to conclude this criminal proceeding by the imposition of sentence. Although I have taken the unusual step of informing you in advance of my inclinations, before imposing sentence, I believe it is important for you, as well as those observing these proceedings, to understand my reasoning for the sentence I am about to impose. The imposition of sentence is one of the most difficult and significant decisions that any criminal court judge is called upon to make. Our legislature sets the parameters for an authorized sentence, but it is a judge that must decide what constitutes a just conclusion to a verdict of guilty. Never before has this court been presented with such a unique and remarkable set of circumstances. Indeed, it can be viewed fairly that this has been a truly extraordinary case. So while one can argue that the trial itself was in many respects somewhat ordinary, the same cannot be said about the circumstances surrounding this sentencing. and that is because of the office you once occupied and which you will soon occupy again. To be sure, it is the legal protections afforded to the office of the President of the United States that are extraordinary, not the occupant of the office. The legal protections, especially within the context of a criminal prosecution, afforded to the office of the President have been laid out by our founders, the Constitution, and most recently interpreted by the United States Supreme Court in the matter of Trump versus the United States, which was decided on July 1st, 2024. The considerable, indeed, extraordinary legal protections afforded by the office of the Chief Executive is a factor that overrides all others. To be clear, the protections afforded the office of the President are not a mitigating factor. They do not reduce the seriousness of the crime or justify its commission in any way. The protections are, however, a legal mandate which, pursuant to the rule of law, this Court must respect and follow. After careful analysis, in obedience to governing mandates, and pursuant to the rule of law, this Court has determined that the only lawful sentence that permits entry of a judgment of conviction without encroaching upon the highest office in the land is an unconditional discharge, which the New York State Legislature has determined is a lawful and permissible sentence for the crime of falsifying business records in the first degree. Therefore, at this time, I impose that sentence to cover all 34 counts. Sir, I wish you Godspeed as you assume your second term in office.
You know, the courts have failed President Trump. Judge Merchan, obviously, a judge who is unethical, literally gave money to the Biden campaign and other anti-Trump political operations in a way that violated judicial ethics, rules, and norms. He's conflicted 6 ways to Sunday. He should not be on the case. And of course, he handled the case and in a way that went against the basic norms related to the way a trial is supposed to be conducted. And as I said earlier, it was a trial about non-crimes, and it had the hallmarks of, an Alice in Wonderland spectacle. And the courts have unfortunately failed, including the Supreme Court, and the fact that it got this far, where Trump is smeared as being called, quote, a felon by these political operatives up in New York, without someone saying enough is enough at the judicial level to stop this abuse of power, to me is going to result in our judicial system having a stain on it for the rest of time. And I issued a statement on this via Twitter for Judicial Watch, and let me bring it up here so I can read it. Okay, pure corruption. Judicial Watch denounces the absurd New York verdict, Soviet-style criminal proceeding and sentencing that have so abused President Trump. What happened to President Trump up in New York is criminal. Trump was outrageously subject to a rigged kangaroo court proceeding run by a biased, conflicted judge and an unethical, politicized Democratic Party prosecution team. And today is another terrible day for the rule of law that will also go down in infamy. The evidence shows that Trump committed no crimes, and this was always a prosecution about, quote, nothing, unquote. This and other Democratic Party political prosecutions of Trump have been abominations under law and are destabilizing to our nation. But thank God for the voters who have rejected this. The federal and New York court systems have failed Trump, the American people, and our constitutional republic. Thankfully, American voters, as I said, stepped up and decisively rejected this lawfare on Election Day. Judicial Watch will continue to expose in court the truth about these attacks on the rule of law, free and fair elections, because as you know, this is all about trying to stop Trump from getting elected, and that failed. and of course, as we try to protect the United States Constitution. So what next? Trump is obviously going to appeal this attack on him. In the meantime, Jack Smith and Garland are conspiring to release a report about nothing, as I say, targeting Trump over his simply doing two things that a president is allowed to do: dispute an election, make sure elections are free and fair, and secondly, keep his own documents. Simple cases that were turned into criminal cases by the gangster government being run by the Biden administration. As we say, their allies had similarly weak cases with Fani Willis. I'll talk about her later, and up with Merchan up in New York. And of course, you had the civil warfare against Trump for Letitia James, where they're trying to destroy his business over arguments about how he valued his properties in loan documents, loans that were fully paid and no one ever complained about. I mean, what Trump has gone through, no American citizen should have been put through. And of course, it was not only an attack on him personally, but an attack on our institutions of government. They don't want self-government. They don't want the people to put presidents in office who are outsiders, who will ask the wrong questions, do things that are unacceptable to the corrupt swamp. And so their response to that is to undermine the people's right to self-government by trying to destroy the president when he's in office, as the Obama-Clinton gang did, and while he's out of office, as the Biden-Obama gang did. And I think this president should appoint a special prosecutor, President Trump, as soon as he gets in, to investigate these abuses of his civil rights and the civil rights of other Americans under color of law. I don't trust the Justice Department to investigate itself. I don't trust the FBI to investigate itself, even if they're run by people who I think are great. In this case, it's going to be Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. I think they're going to get confirmed by the Senate. But there's got to be accountability for what happened to Trump. Trump is a crime victim. And the crooks who targeted him need to be investigated and held fully accountable. It's not retribution, it's justice. And as I said, Judicial Watch has all these ongoing cases to find out the details of this abuse of Trump, and we will file more requests and more cases to try to get that full accounting. Because we don't trust the feds, no matter, frankly, if Trump appoints a special counsel, I'm sure there will be things that he won't look into or she won't look into. And it will be up to Judicial Watch, again, to do the heavy lifting to uncover the full truth about this unprecedented corruption, the worst political corruption in American history in many ways, which is the targeting of Trump. So he's been so abused. What an outrage today was with Judge Merchan. What an outrage. And what a failure of our system that it was allowed to take place. Really terrible. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.